partial or I guess no immunity whatsoever, having worked hand in glove with presidents, at the White House, from your perspective, what do they actually need?
Yeah, so Trump is basically claiming absolute immunity. The 3 liberal justices are leaning towards no immunity, and the 6 conservative justices who will decide the case seem to be leaning towards some sort of qualified immunity, or there would be immunity for official acts, but not immunity for private acts that were for his own gain. I think that sounds about right. A president needs to be free to make controversial decisions without fearing that he's going to be prosecuted after he leaves office, putting aside Trump and whatever you think of what he did. But he shouldn't be free from prosecution if he commits a crime, like takes a bribe or something like that. So I think they're going to come up with a compromise. But it's also important to remember why we're here. The reason this case is being decided is because no president until now has ever been prosecuted, former president. And we're now experiencing a case of lawfare against this president. 91 charges against the president at the federal, state, and local level. That is unprecedented. And so that's why this case is now before the court.
Julia, Justice Jackson said she's concerned that giving a president near total immunity or total immunity would lead to the Oval Office becoming, this is a quote, the seat of criminal activity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a real possibility?
Well, I think that's what you're hearing liberals raise, and I thought it was interesting when you heard Justice Sonia Sotomayor ask former President Trump's attorney, would this apply to a political assassination, for example? And he said, it could. These are certainly some eyebrow-raising scenarios, but these are all hypotheticals. We have to remember that, and I think Trump's team is definitely saying these are hypotheticals, but ultimately, I think Mark's right. I think we're going to land somewhere in the middle, and then also ultimately, look, this is a delay for former President Trump. He wants to keep delaying and delaying and delaying until after the election. And right now, it seems to be moving in that direction with these cases.
Hugh, the 2 trials that Trump was involved with today were 200 miles apart, New York and Washington. They didn't overlap in any real legal sense, but I don't think there's any question that in the public realm, they intersect and impact one another, and certainly in the minds of voters.
Let me geek out a little bit and inform the audience that they go to the 2-hour and 20-minute mark in the oral argument that C-SPAN has posted. Justice Barrett raises the question of state prosecutors, implying, come on, at least aren't we going to give the president immunity from state prosecutors? Isn't that obvious? In the background, of course, is the abuse of law being conducted by Alvin Bragg, which is an embarrassment for anyone who's a prosecutor in name and in reality with an obligation to their oath. But I will say this about the argument. It's the common law greatest hit. Marbury versus Madison, McCullough v. Maryland, Korematsu's in there. They toss in every case you've ever talked about. It's a genuine case of first impression. It will be remanded. And if I had any guess to make at all, it's that the Chief Justice will keep this opinion to himself because it's going to be up there with another one that was mentioned, Youngstown Sheet and Tube, a touchstone. Because no one's ever decided this before. It'll be the last day of the term. No one will be happy, but it'll be very important precedent, not just as they all made this point, this president, President Trump, or President Biden, but for every president for all time. So they'll take their time. Very important case.
Mark, take a look at this NBC poll. It takes a look at Trump's sort of criminal cases right now more broadly and finds that 50% of voters think Trump is being held to the same legal standard as everybody else, i.e. treated fairly, but then 43% say he's being treated unfairly and targeted. Translate that to us in terms of the general election.
I think that his base thinks he's being treated unfairly, and the left thinks that he's not being treated unfairly, and the swing voters are going to decide the election. And I don't think they're going to decide it on this. I think they're going to decide it on inflation. I think they're going to decide it on the chaos in the country. But it's clearly energized his base, and it's the reason why he's the Republican nominee. But if you look at that case that we're seeing in New York, so he's being charged with trying to influence the election by suppressing a negative news story. Well, if that's the standard, why don't we prosecute Joe Biden, who conspired with the FBI and the intelligence community to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story and call it Russian disinformation? Or Bill Clinton, who constantly suppressed bimbo eruptions, not by paying people off, but by hiring reams of lawyers to dig through their records and their sex lives and try and intimidate and harass them. Suppressing bad stories is what campaigns do, and it's been done in much worse ways than what Donald Trump is accused of doing. So this is just an example of how, people who wouldn't necessarily support Donald Trump but see the unfairness of how he's being treated rally around him, and it's why he's the nominee, and it's why Joe Biden might lose to him.
Hugh, Trump earlier in the morning in New York met with a group of construction workers and union members trying to win over the endorsement of the Teamsters, as is now sort of customary fashion for him. I mean, he's turning these trial days into campaign events. Do you think that ultimately these trials and these cases are hamstringing him? Hamstringing? Can you even say? I don't know if that's a word. Is he hamstrung by them or helped by them?
I think he is helped by them because he is not doing rallies. He's doing very focused events. I'd like to see him at Columbia like Speaker Johnson courageously did today. I love that he went to the bodega on the Upper West Side. I think Donald Trump is inventive. He knows New York. He knows the niches of New York. He knows where to go in Queens. He is the best performer as president that we've had in my lifetime. And this is 1968 all over again, and I think he's going to come out on top.
So Hugh, Julia mentioned these anti-Israel protests that are sort of igniting around the country, some of them turning blatantly anti-Semitic. What are your final thoughts about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, as we head into an election year, we are seeing that once again, this is an example of a foreign policy issue really impacting an election. So you have President Trump and President Biden forced to respond to this issue. It's easy for President Trump and Republicans to respond to it because it seems like the Republican base is very united on their feelings towards Israel. For President Biden, it's much more tricky, and that's why when he was asked about these protests the other day, he condemned them.